like people have started to use wellness as like a status symbol. I do kind of think people are starting to use therapy speak as a status symbol as well. And that is something that I was really feeling from Sydney in this conversation of.
Hi everyone, I'm Julie, she's Kelly, and we're here to find love. Today we're joined by a very special guest, Jenna from the Date Card podcast. Today we're recapping episode 3 of Joey's season of The Bachelor. For those of you who don't know us, we're two dating coaches who analyze the relationship psychology and dating themes in reality TV shows, especially The Bachelor. So if you like this kind of stuff, hit the subscribe button to follow along and join the conversation. You can also listen to us on podcast form on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Before we recap the episode, it's very important to introduce our very special guest. We are so honored to be collaborating with Jenna today. We absolutely love your podcast. Me and Kelly talk about it all the time. And we are just so grateful for you to come on. So for our audience, those who don't know you, like, can you please share a little bit more about yourself?
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. I'm really happy to just like get to chat about the show, be funny, get serious, and make new friends within the Bachelor commentary space. My name is Jenna, and I'm the host of Date Card Pod. I have been podcasting about The Bachelor since Becca Kufrin's season, and feels like an entire lifetime I've lived from that to where we are now.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, it's been a time.
It has been a time. Yeah,
Becca Kufrin season.
Yeah, Kufrin. It was a good one to start for sure, and like we had that really explosive like Paradise afterwards, where we had Demi as the first ever like kind of main bisexual like storyline in the franchise. And something that's special about Date Card Pod is that is a queer-based recap of The Bachelor. I am a lesbian who unfortunately watches The Bachelor, and I love to talk about it still, and I really still find a lot of community within it, and it's been really fun. Date Card Pod has been a really beautiful experience for me to connect with people that I just would have never thought I would have connected with. I'm so sorry about this glare, y'all. And
you look great. You look cool. It's like it's kind of like you're inside a video game.
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely dressed the part. I was like, how can I look like a lesbian from Portland? I think that like something that I think is funny about being in the Bachelor fandom and as an audience is that when you kind of tell strangers on the street that you watch The Bachelor, they will have a lot of different reactions, and a lot of times they'll be like, that show, isn't that like a really regressive, sexist, straight show? And yes, it is on the surface, but I think what a lot of people don't realize is that there's actually a huge section of really progressive, leftist, queer, diverse audience that still likes to watch trash TV. I think it's just like this conception of you're like better than the rest because you're progressive and queer and, you know, like diverse, that you don't like to also just like unwind and watch trashy television shows, you know? I think it's been a really beautiful experience to see how deep that well goes, and how there's actually just a huge subsection of the audience that's actually like, you know, smart and cool and sexy and fun.
Jenna, I'm so happy that you're on this show. I do have like a little bit of like, ooh, Bachelor royalty is among us. Wow, this is so exciting. Like, I'm so excited to have you here because truly, like, I think listening to your show and listening to you on Instagram is like part of what inspired me and made me be like, ooh, maybe there are interesting conversations that we can have on The Bachelor that are progressive and that are moving the conversation forward, and seeing the way that you are able to do that also while being like hilarious at the same time, like, and just kind of having this like really cool representation of like your personality, but also having this great critical lens on the show. I was like, wow, that's amazing, and kind of something that at least I try to embody in our show. I mean, I don't have like the comic, you know, skills that you do, but I do think that it's...
Yeah, you guys are funny.
First and foremost, we did a full deep dive of Joey's episode 3, and we really got into the nitty gritty of all the different things that happened in this episode over on the Date Card podcast. So if you want to hear us talk about all of the things, the pageant date, Jen's one-on-one, all of the stuff with family curses and yada, 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 we really get into it over in Date Card. So you guys should go check out that episode because it was such a good conversation. I'm still like a little jittery from it. It was so good. And
so good.
Now here in this video, we're going to get into, I think, maybe what was some of the juiciest parts of this episode, which was the Maria, Sydney, Madina conflict. And oh my gosh, I feel like I have so much to say about this. I'm bursting, but I also am so curious to hear what you do have to say about it. Jenna, can I throw it to you? Can I get some initial reactions to what you thought about what was going on here?
Because I think what's interesting is that on the surface level, it is the most benign drama, of like a recent season, and especially of this current season. It's so like based in like just what we're talking about age, and that conversation's already done, but now it's traveling into this whole other space, and it just doesn't seem like it should be happening at all, which I agree. What I think is interesting is that it does bring in what's actually really happening, which is like, conflict resolution not going right. I don't know, like, I don't know if it's like just somebody really wanting like attention, like center of attention, getting like screen time, misplaced like projection issues at one point, like, Sydney's like, I just feel like it would be wrong of me not to tell Joe. I'm like, where, how? Like, this is not affect you at all. And on our podcast last week, we talked about the beginning of the drama with the age, like, bullying thing that was happening. And I said to my guest, Jasmine, I was like, imagine sitting down and having to explain this drama to Joey. Like, really, like, it would be so embarrassing and cringe. And the fact that it actually happened was embarrassing, cringe. And then it just continued on to this other thing. I thought it was just, I did find it to be fascinating as far as like how the dynamics of the contestants can really like ramp up each other and go on these like big like defense tours. I think we saw that happen a lot during like Zach's season when it was like Kat or somebody who was like, I'm gonna lace these boots up and whatever, and she was like white knighting, white knighting for Charity a bunch, and was like, wait, Charity is fine, she can handle herself.
Oh my gosh, you bring up so much good stuff. I mean, you're right, I didn't actually even think about it from the perspective of like, why is Sydney like coming in hot and like being like, I gotta defend Madina from this aggressor bully person. It is a little bit of a interesting way to position herself in the relationships of the group and specifically the relationship to Madina. That is a really interesting point that I hadn't even thought about. For context, if anyone didn't for some reason watch the episode, what happened
God
was
bless.
Madina last week brought up that she was worried her time is more limited than other people because she is 31, and that stressed her out. And she brought it up in a group scenario. Maria, not in that scenario, but I think went off and talked to somebody else and was like, oh my gosh, like, what is she talking about? She's so hot. And like, she is like this gorgeous woman. And also like, I'm also, however old she is, 28, 29. I'm also old. I'm old too. Like, we should own it. Something like that. Sydney overhears, takes it upon herself to tell Madina. And it seems like the thing had been put to rest last week, but it is interesting that this week, it seems like the thing that maybe Madina was most upset about seemed to be the fact that Maria was pushing Madina to give her answers about who was talking about her. Like, that was the thing that it seemed like Madina brought up to Joey. Like, she was like, oh, I felt bullied for like this like age comment, and then I also felt like I was like getting pushed to like talk about it more. And maybe that's true in a certain sense. Like, maybe she was getting pushed to talk about it more than she wanted to talk about it. Or you brought this up, Julie, in Date Card, that Madina is now kind of getting saddled with this like age-related storyline that maybe she never wanted, and maybe that's part of like her stress in this situation. But I was very shocked to hear her use the word bullying to describe what Maria was doing.
It just felt like it was so much subtext, which is a very common thing for Bachelor seasons. There's a lot happening between the woman and the house that, the Bachelor, they kind of bring to the Bachelor, and Joey is probably the most equipped Bachelor to deal with this kind of thing. He's he's probably the one that can actually sit with them and to help process it, but it wasn't anybody's place. there was just so much confusion and language usage and mislabeling happening between everybody that was making the situation much bigger than it actually was.
You bring up such a good point about the fact that there was also probably an element of this that, like, I feel like there's, like, just parts of the conversation that are, of course, missing. We, of course, don't get everything in the edit. So, like, there's pieces of this puzzle that it's almost seemed like it didn't, they kind of made it not make sense. Like, Madina's, like, problem with Maria, like, it was like, what's happening here? And I felt myself being, like, confused by what her issue was, and I feel like I had to, like, really listen to what she was saying and, like, get, like, a little like crumbs of it to, like, put the pieces of it together. But I almost feel like Madina got kind of shafted, and I think she actually maybe did talk to Joey about it, because last week she said, I'm making this blanket date. She, like, set up those blankets to, like, talk to Joey, and she's like, I'm going to talk to him about this in my own way. Like, we saw her do that, but we never actually saw the scene of Madina and Joey talking about it. So there's all this context that is very much missing from this. So I feel like a lot of people are jumping to, like, be like, what is Madina doing? Why is Madina acting this way? But I kind of feel a little bit for her, because I also don't know why she's acting this way. Not exactly, but I also feel like she's the one who we've heard the least from. And to your point, Jen, it's like we're actually hearing the most from Sydney, I'm here to defend you, Madina, as opposed to actually hearing from Madina and how she feels about what's going on. And so that is, like, a really frustrating thing. And that actually comes back to editing as opposed to any of the people in the show, you know?
So true. Yeah.
It's like a puzzle piece almost, because Jenna, you made a really good point that a lot of it was happening from the prior episode. But then you have to really pay attention to this drama that's happening behind the scenes that you don't think is going to be a big deal. Everything went to a head this episode, where now it's a really big focal point. Now there's lots of people in the house talking about it. Now Joey's being presented with it. And it just felt very confusing, and I wanted to use this as an opportunity to talk about, from Sydney's part, she made this executive decision to bring this to Joey because she was feeling like Maria was a bully. And so much of it kind of goes down to, you know, like, I think it's very popular to say all of your emotions are valid, and that is absolutely true. But not every single emotion and feeling needs to be acted upon. And that's kind of a difference between emotional immaturity with the way that you take responsibility, and then emotional maturity with how you understand, maybe I'm projecting, maybe I'm jealous, maybe I'm intimidated, maybe I just don't like her. And that's not a we problem, that's a me problem. But I felt like that was something that Sydney did not do. In fact, she made it, it wasn't just like Maria is doing this thing I don't like. It's now Maria is a bully to a lot of people in this house, or to me, or to her.
Yeah, including me,
Exactly. Now she has to have this other thing. So that kind of, I kind of wish there was a little bit more conversation about that in particular, because I felt like Sydney, if you talk to her about it, she can probably get away with a really airtight defense of, like, I feel this way, so then therefore that's a period. There is no conversation. It has ended at my emotional experience, because that's the only one that matters.
Yeah, and that's what we saw. That's what we saw eventually, And I think I laughed earlier when you just mentioned, like, you know, we could have a feeling, but how do we act on it? I was like, gosh, this show would be 3 episodes long if, like, you know, everyone in the show was able to be like, hey, you know what? I didn't like that moment. Like, I thought Maria was being just, like, weirdly, you know, peacocky or whatever, when she's like, no, or whatever, and taking this, trying to defend Madina, but, like, she didn't ask for it. And as Sydney, if I'm Sydney, I'd be like, I didn't really like that. I thought that was kind of, like, in poor taste, but, like, it didn't need to continue on. And then I think it is really interesting to see how you guys are talking about, like, so quickly, one little, like, use of the word bully and this experience not explained quite right completely snowballed into a bigger, you know, drama later on, where the women are now even heightened, their emotions are even more heightened. Maria feels like her back is against the wall, but at the same time, like we saw Sydney not really, she has her defense, she has what she feels, and she's not going to elaborate, she's not going to give examples or receipts, you know, this stuff happening. Maria standing up for her, so she's, can you please explain a moment that I was doing this? She's like, no, you were,
Right.
what is the
No,
word
I'm
she
walking
used? Yeah,
She said, I can't deal with this
Yeah.
negativity anymore. I'm removing myself from the situation. Something of that nature, right, is what she
Yeah.
said. And you're absolutely right. It is using this language. The word bullying carries so much weight to bring that into the conversation. And Madina was the one who did it. And then Sydney kind of jumped. I also felt bullied, says Sydney. And she jumped onto it. And, Madina was the one who actually had some kind of experience with Maria that perhaps needed to be dealt with. And Maria was actually trying to deal with it. I will put a big asterisk on this. And I love Maria so much, but I do need to call her in just a touch. She didn't do the best job in this conversation by any means. She was like, tell me how I made you feel bullied. And she was like, it was very clear. She already had her mind set, which is, I am not a bully. And anything that you say, I'm going to explain why you're wrong. So I'm not surprised that Madina was like, I didn't say that you were a bully. I just said that I felt bullied. It's like, if I'm Madina, I also would not want to enter into that conversation with Maria, because Maria was already in a zone of she didn't know how to handle Madina's hurt feelings or the other hurt feelings in the room. And she did try to ask those questions, but I do think her tone was basically already shutting down any meaningful dialogue.
True.
And, I feel for Maria, because at the same time, it's so frustrating to have somebody bring up that level of language to describe something that you did. And I don't even know that I would respond well if someone was called something that I did bullying. I would really have to call upon my highest, best self to be able to show up into that conversation without freaking out the way Maria kind of did. But I do think that Maria's response in that situation was kind of the fuel for what Sydney goes on to do, which is well, you were calling me names. Well, you were yelling at us and doing all of these things. And technically those things that was true. No?
Yeah,
No.
except for when Sydney eventually announces her departure and is she leaves, and then she comes back and is I just want to let you know I am actually leaving. It's girl, you didn't have to tell us. We thought you were gone. It was she was looking for people to come along with her, hey, anyone else
totally.
want to join my allyship, join Team Sydney? And even Medina was I'm good, actually.
Sydney was kind of accusing Maria of some behaviors that she was doing. Kind of oh, girls, why don't you come? It felt a little bit Mean Girl, creating purposeful division.
Wow.
Right? There was a little bit something catty about it. And Sydney seems very, very good at playing into that. And the reason why the word bullying is such a intense word in the house is because traditionally, anybody that watches the show or even knows about the show knows that the person that does that, they never make it far. It makes it so hard for the lead to form a connection with somebody that is against the house, because now the lead has to default to thinking there is something that you're not seeing. I am not seeing the full picture. And Joey is so... For somebody that doesn't show a lot of his cards, he is looking for somebody to show their cards, and he's looking to know somebody deeply. To Kelly's point, Maria, in her best self, and how rarely are we our best selves in conflict, but in that moment, she was displaying defensiveness, which is a very erosive communication tactic. As soon as you're defensive, it's very hard for anybody to interact with you, because she's this is how I'm feeling and here's my excuses. And in a fight, in any argument, there is truth to both sides, and it's really just holding that, negotiating that difference, and understanding that there is going to have to be some compromise in how you're viewing this situation. And I felt she wasn't able to kind of enter into that, and then Sydney used any little bit of ammunition to be that is why you are a bully, because you did this thing. So then Maria she had no chance. I think in that situation, how would anybody feel if you know that as soon as you're called that, your time is running out? She's on a 2-on-1 date next week. That is the kiss of death. Whoever goes on that date, one of you is going home.
I definitely found when you just said that she kind of was almost trying to create division, and by when she was creating division, that was almost a form of what she's accusing Maria of. I thought a little later in the episode when they're all at the pool section and the rose party or whatever gets cut short a little bit, she does something that I really hadn't seen in a while, which is just fully be like, yeah, sorry y'all that you didn't get to see him. Like, this is because of this drama, because of this, I had to do this. And just, like, fully admits that she intentionally did that. Like, that she knows it cut people's, like, time short, but didn't even really apologize. And I wonder almost if, again, that was, like, another tactic, maybe not conscious. I'm not gonna completely, you know, put this on Sydney. These are just people on shows, right? But what we're seeing is that, you know, maybe that was another attempt to kind of put Maria again on the outs as like the real, the reason why you, you really need to dislike Maria because she's really affecting your time. And it was like, I felt like very pointed.
Yeah, you're right. I agree that Sydney is actually so good at positioning herself in a certain way and then positioning other people in a certain way using her words, right? She's very, very good at that. And in comparison to Maria, God bless her, like she's such a straightforward person. She can't position herself. She is exactly what she is, and she doesn't know how you can see her just like losing hold of the narrative. She can't even like get her hands around it. She'll try to say something and Sydney will just be like, the manipulation is beginning. And like, what do you do? I'm Maria. I'm like, okay, I guess I won't say anything then. Like, you know, and it's so
nicely said, Kelly, because that is it, because you're so right.
Oh, yes. That was so, that's kind of like, I was like, I have never seen this before, that she's just fully like trying to completely, it reminded me of like the Kathy Teresa drama a little bit on Golden Bachelor on the stairwell when like Teresa was trying to like apologize and Kathy was like, you don't mean it. This is not, I am not accepting this. And I was like, what is happening? This is next level.
I really feel for Maria in this whole situation because yes, she didn't do the best job in that conversation, in that initial like conversation. I think it was like after that group date when this all happened, when Sydney like walked away and Maria like in that conversation, I mean, Maria did, I think she called Sydney in that conversation Missy Troublemaker.
You're right. She definitely used some words. Yeah.
She did, like, she had a few moments where she said things. I was like, Maria, reel it in. Please reel it in because, you know what? Like, this is giving fuel to Sydney. And here's the thing. It's like, Maria, you can see Sydney takes that fuel. She immediately is like, oh, you're verbally assaulting me now. I see. That's the kind of person you are. You're a catty person. She's taking everything. She's churning it out. She's painting a picture in real time. And Maria is still like, what? Like, she's like, can't even catch up. She's so lost in it. Like, she's like,
so true.
You know, and I just felt for her because, I mean, this is also a thing that not exactly the same that I've experienced this, but in the sense that, you know, if I'm in a conversation or a conflict with someone and if they're really good, if they're very articulate and just like good at explaining their side and can really explain their perspective really well, I can sometimes actually struggle, to your point, Julie, in a conflict. You know, my brain just shuts down. I'm angry or I'm sad and I'm hurt or whatever. My brain shuts down. I can't really explain myself very well in those situations. And I expect if the other person is like really successfully explaining like their point of view and I just can't really get the words out to explain what it was like for me, I just kind of shut down because I'm like, I'm losing control of this narrative. It's getting out of control. I can't really make sense of what's happening here. And I think anything I'm saying is making it worse. And so I just kind of stopped talking. And I think Maria was having like some version of that where you could see her like spirit is like kind of like diminishing throughout the episode because she's like, I don't know. She's like, I don't actually really know what to do with this because like this thing is like spinning out of my control and I can't get my hand, like she can't explain herself well enough. She can't even explain, even to Joey when she sits him down, like she couldn't even really explain what was happening. And even Joey was kind of like, I think you seem genuine, but I don't have any clue what you're talking about. Like, you know, like.
Well, her authenticity did save her in that conversation because Joey was like, I think you're more real than how Sydney was being. I can sense that in the conversation. But it's so funny that you bring that up, Kelly, because I really do see that Maria is a very, like, her emotions are like primary colors. This is what I feel. Blah, blah, blah. You know, like, it's very straightforward and it's really specific. But Sydney paints in like all of this nuance. So when you're kind of swimming in that, you can get really lost in the symbology and like how she's explaining something, because there's so much nuance and context and like things you're grabbing onto and therapy speak that you're weaponizing. And it's like, how do you hold on to this when you communicate in a very direct, blunt way?
Yeah.
So Maria, it was kind of funny in that conversation to Joey, because she was like, you should have asked her more questions. Like, you kind of like making Joey feel bad.
Oh my God.
Joey was a little bit hard on himself. He was like, why didn't I ask more questions to Sydney?
I really thought that was such a great moment too. Like, we mentioned this on Date Card. I was like, we were talking about power dynamics a little bit.
Yeah.
And that way that Maria was already kind of exhibiting that in her conversation with Joey earlier in the week. And then I thought in this moment, yes, in the end it saved her, but I also, like, I was like, damn, Maria, good job. You completely, like, you were spiraling, you had all this spiral, but then you, like, completely dominated him and made him question everything, and it was impressive. I was, like, highly impressed, and she's not wrong. Like, that's, like, the thing is, goes back to what we just said in the very beginning of this episode. It's like, this is such a nothing burger. Sit down and really try to explain this to him. Like, if anyone could literally sit down and explain this to him, and none of it would just, like, what are we talking about? And and Joey doesn't even know, because Sydney didn't even give him the role, and then Madina didn't even give him, it's whatever. So, we'll see. And I'm not necessarily looking forward to this 2-on-1, because I feel like it's going to continue this dynamic of them both just, like, not really getting to the core of what is happening, because how could they? Now they're very much going to be entering this in a very defensive stage, because like you said, it's the kiss of death for one of them, and then usually whoever wins the 2-on-1 goes home within the next week or two.
Right, exactly. I'm sad, honestly, for Maria, who actually seemed to have, like, a real connection with Joey. I'm sad that she kind of, just, like, her opportunity just kind of withered away because some random girl, like, had random beef with her, honestly, that had nothing to do with Sydney. It had nothing to do with Sydney, and she just inserted herself into it and made Maria into a problem that even the original girl who was hurt, Madina, even Madina is over it. And, Maria is just getting kind of saddled with this because of, Sydney, to your point, your first point, Julie, is just Sydney had a big feeling, which was like, I'm upset that Maria upset Madina, and therefore I will just destroy her and demolish her on national television. And it really does break my heart to see someone like Maria, who I really think has like I think she has like a real kind heart. Like, I can really feel that from her, but she just can't get her words together just like quite right, or like she just can't explain herself quite right. And it's kind of someone like Sydney is kind of getting away with painting her in a certain way, because Sydney is like a master at using this, to your point, Julie, therapy speak. She just like used all this like big words, big language, like to kind of walk circles around Maria and invalidate anything Maria was saying, which is ironic, because that was Sydney's original problem, was that she felt like Maria was invalidating Madina. And then in the end, it was Sydney who was like, anything you say, it's manipulation. Anything you say is a verbal attack. Everything got this label, and now Maria can't speak. Like, there's nothing she can really do.
I just remember this one moment. I wanted you guys' opinion on it, is when at one point Maria with Joey says, if you like her, then you can't like me. We are two polar opposites. That was so fascinating to see somebody say that so clear. It's sometimes talked about before in other seasons, mostly just in ITMs. I can't believe if he chooses her, then he must not like me, because how can he like two different, people? But I was like shocked that she said it to him, and then he repeated it in his ITM. Maybe she's right. What if I like her, does that mean I can't like both of them? And that was very interesting to me.
I like that boundary. I think that it feels, because it is true, like they are different in terms of how they move in the world. And I think that Maria is pretty spot on in assessing like the way that Sydney communicates with people, the way that she talks about things is very worlds apart from how I am. And Maria believes, at least in the show, we're talking about characters, she believes that she knows what Joey likes and it's a version of her. If Joey doesn't like her, then that means that she's off base on what she thinks Joey is and if she thinks that she's compatible in a relationship with him. But I kind of love that she was like, this is my line. I wouldn't want to be with somebody that liked people that were disrespectful or not kind or someone that, you know, was dishonest or doing certain things. I mean, I really love that.
When there's someone on the show who is, I don't know, you see them be really awful to somebody else, but then everyone else is still friends with that person, that really actually makes me look at all those other people kind of poorly.
Yes.
Like, R.I.P. Leia, like, love you so much, but I don't know why you were siding with Sydney in this moment, but it's okay. I support Asian women's rights and Asian women's wrongs. It's okay. It's fine. It's fine. That's okay. But I do get kind of icked out seeing someone kind of just like be buddy with someone who like kind of sucks. So in that sense, I kind of get what you're saying. It's like my partner is also interested in someone who just like sucks RS. It's like, I don't know, that would actually make me feel differently about my guy.
I mean, it all comes down to like also projection and stuff, right? Like Sydney could say the same, right? Oh, you like Maria, then obviously you like horrible bullies and we are not compatible. And I feel like we could all say that and I think it's true, like, right. And ultimately that's just our personal boundary. I don't want to date you if you like XYZ in other people. But you know, I mean, you run a dangerous game when you play that, in my opinion, and you also run a dangerous game when you're kind of projecting what you think the other person likes, especially in this case. If it's an actual dating IRL, it's definitely a little bit different. But in this case, she is claiming to understand what Joey actually prioritizes in a relationship or in another person, and she doesn't fucking know.
That's true. That's a good point. You're absolutely right. Yeah, it's risky for her to do it. It was risky for her to. That was my main thought when she said that. I was like, you didn't have to take it there, Maria, because that now makes him really think I actually really have to get rid of one of these girls ASAP. Because right? It's like she kind of put both of them on the chopping block and he's going to pick one of them, but it didn't have to come to that. Maybe they could have like talked it out and all could have been fine and both of them could be in the top 4. I mean, you know.
When Maria did that, I thought that it was a really good gameplay from her. It's not like she's comparing herself between Sydney or personality or looks. She's like, this is a value judgment from this point on. Do you prioritize people that are kind? Are you prioritizing people that are honest? Like, that was really what she was saying in the subtext. And that was what Joey was understanding in terms of, like, there is now friction in the house. And the one thing I know about Joey, I don't know a lot, but this man loves harmony. Like, this guy loves peace. Do I want to be in a house with this girl for the next few weeks, or let me get out right now? Like, either he picks me or he picks her. And Maria also has the physical connection with him that is keeping her ahead. Yeah. So that's, in my opinion, I mean, of course, I do think Sydney's going to go home because I haven't seen him develop a relationship with Sydney outside of this bullying comment.
It's a risky but good game plan if it works.
Yes.
My thought immediately went to when you talked about it, I was like, she picked the right Bachelor. Had she done that with Zach, remember when he was like, fuck you, career, like, you don't get to talk to me about what I care about, you know, like, he would have been so put off by that. Yeah. And maybe rightly so, right? Again, we talked about all angles of this, how it can feel, but, or how it could just backfire, you know? But yeah, I think it would have backfired with a lot of other Bachelors, and with a Bachelor like Joey, I think it, you know, we'll see how it plays.
Worked right into your hand.
Yeah. Well, to maybe your point then, Julie, maybe Maria did understand something about Joey when she did that. Because she recognized that this would be something that Joey would hook onto as that value. I mean, it is a value that Joey seems to have related to like people being nice to each other, right? Like, I think that is something that he cares about. And so maybe Maria judged him correctly with that comment.
I can see a reality in where he sends both of them home, or
don't say that.
You know, just because I don't know how we've really talked about it. Like, they're both going to be entering to this so defensively, and I can see how they can easily escalate it to something that they're both at their worst. Again, not who they are as people truly in life, but they have the potential to really escalate it and show the worst sides of them, including Maria. So I could see a world where he could send them both home.
I would like to see Joey make that kind of move.
I know, I would love it. I feel like
that.
I mean, he would take control of a season, though. It would really show a new side of his personality versus
Very
what I've seen so
interesting.
far, which is I'm kind of prioritizing a good experience for me and everybody.
And listen, that could break badly for him in the end. We've all been wondering, like, where is the negativity,
Exactly.
where is the Joey, like, downfall in a sense? Not that I'm praying
Yeah.
for it. I am not praying for a man's downfall. No, not this time.
Very interesting to explore the idea of like how Joey's decision about this, like what that says about like his trajectory and his storyline as a bachelor and as a dater. I think that's a really interesting way of looking at this situation. I mean, personally, I am vibing with the Maria kind of has a little bit of like this like stronghold or this like power over Joey that like makes him into a puppy. I mean, I'm like kind of into it like as a dynamic for Joey, and I find it to be a little bit interesting because she's so challenging, not this kind of soft, like it's not like soft on soft, like you know what I'm saying? Like Joey has such a softness to the way that he is approaching relationships, and I think there's something very interesting about the dynamic between Joey and Maria. So I find myself just like really rooting for it. I kind of want to see what that dynamic brings out of Joey's personality or brings out of his character. I mean, I could see it going poorly to both of your points that like maybe it ends up like her personality is so big that Joey like makes himself smaller and smaller for her. But I guess time will tell, right? Like I guess time will tell. The thing about the Sydney Maria dynamic that we briefly touched on, but I think is really important to call out in all this, whoever Joey picks is whoever Joey picks. But I think the thing actually that I pulled away from this situation is that Sydney did this thing which was like weaponizing the therapy speak, and even though it has nothing to do with the relationships here, I do think it's worth just like mentioning that the way Sydney does use her language in these conversations, she clearly has a very good understanding of the type of language that is used in these settings, and in a way that maybe I can't say one way or the other if either of these girls have had therapy, but the way that she has been using that language in these different conversations of like, here's where the manipulation comes in, and like
you
this is verbal
invalidated
assault. You invalidated me XYZ like in this ways, like I'm removing myself from this negativity. The way she is kind of bringing in these concepts, to me it is such a great example of how it's like the popularization of therapy. It's like I'm such a big proponent of therapy. Of course, it's so beneficial. So many people are so helped by being able to have that space to go through their emotions, process their emotions and experiences, and make sense of what's happening in their lives, and having that dedicated space for going inward. And at the same time, I think because therapy has become so popular, and like the way it's like social media has all of these like therapy posts and pop psychology and stuff, that type of language, it is becoming more accessible to more people, but it's also kind of becoming kind of like the wellness industrial complex in general. It's kind of like people have started to use wellness as like a status symbol. I do kind of think people are starting to use therapy speak as a status symbol as well, and that is something that I was really feeling from Sydney in this conversation. Of she's kind of like wielding it to make anything Maria says, Maria isn't able to speak that same language, and she was kind of like, oh, anything you say, you're the bad guy, I'm the good guy, you can't participate in the conversation to this level, and that makes you less than me. It immediately puts me above you because I have a way of talking about this that is signaling that I'm in this in-group of people who've gone to therapy.
I think ultimately, I think that this conversation is interesting to me because at times I've been bothered by somebody like Nick Viall being like, we're overusing the word gaslight. And yes, we do. But like, sometimes I'm also like, well, why are we policing the way people are trying to like figure out their dynamics or whatever? And like learning these words can really help people, right? Like so many young women don't know that they're in these situations. So it's just a muddy. So I think there's like both sides to it. It can become harmful and you can use it to higher yourself up in this class, which I really love. That's interesting. I'm going to really have to think about that. But that was beautiful. But then, like, also the other side of it, like, really helping. And so I think it kind of depends on maybe, ultimately, we can't know what anyone's intention is, I guess, unless they speak it or we are in a personal dynamic with them. But yeah, if Sydney's intention is to weaponize it, that is not good. If it's not her intention and it just happened to be weaponized, yikes. And that is, I guess, to your point, the worry we have with this expanding to TikTok and becoming like a thing that we all just, you know, use. But
that's such a good counterpoint, actually, to what I said, and I appreciate that. It is interesting. Julie, I want to hear what you have to say too about this, and like what Jenna brings up about like the good of it, and then when I'm bringing up about the bad of it. Like it's tricky. It's like a tricky, really, really tricky thing.
Because I think that what we had talked about a little bit before is that Sydney is creating an in and an out. There's an in group, there's an out group. Here's in language, here's out language. And with the therapy conversation, this is inclusive, this is exclusive. And the way that she's harming this conversation is that she's like, I can see something you can't even see. So you're causing harm and you can't even see it. Yeah. Like there's all of this happening and you have no idea that how you're behaving, your personality, how you're interacting with people in the house, all of this, you can't even see how awful it is. And you are a bully and you're doing these things. That conversation, that is maybe what Sydney is the most objectively guilty about. Yes. She is guilty of being like, I am superior and how I am saying this, seeing this, and I am not the arbitrator, but I am, you know, I am taking it upon myself to bring this up. And there's a little bit of this complex that Sydney's applying to the conversation based on, you make a really good point, Kelly, about like how she is kind of creating this even more division, like with language, with like
not
the way
helping
that
at all.
Things.
Yeah, like if you actually want to approach the situation and help Maria, then like you could be like, I feel like this is now like definitely I'm like, oh yeah, Sydney is not trying to help. So that
You're
to me
so right.
makes it a little bit more like it's maybe her intentions might not be as pure. Again, we don't know the character we're seeing.
Of course.
Whatever. But
yes.
Yeah, that's such a good point.
Yes, I'm glad you bring this up, Jenna, that we have to always mention. We don't know these people. We don't know the story of what happened. Edited scenes, conversations are not fully shown. We got to take it all with a grain of salt. We're analyzing the scenario as presented to us, and that's all. And this is not an invitation to then go judge these people in real life, send them internet hate. Please don't do that. Yeah, that is not what this conversation is about. We are just trying to analyze what we're seeing. And to your point, Julie, the one thing that I think we can say about these scenes and the way Sydney uses this language is that it is used to kind of give herself credibility and kind of give credibility to her point of view. And it's kind of like because Maria can't describe her point of view as well, and definitely not with that kind of type of language, because Maria is not able to do that, it makes Maria, you know, of course as viewers we're all like, oh my god, like Sydney is like horrible, Maria, like I think a lot of people are really siding with Maria in this situation. But I think in the house it's probably a lot more confusing because Maria is not articulating herself well at all, and Sydney is kind of using all this language that makes people think, oh well, that makes sense, she knows what she's talking about. And like it's almost like she's trying to make herself the winner by default because she can explain it with this language that people are learning to associate with. Oh, good. Therapy stuff. Good. This type of language is how we become healthier and blah, 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 and more self-actualized and blah, blah, blah. And Sydney is talking like that, so she must be right. And I think in the house, it's probably a lot more confusing versus for viewers. I think it's a lot easier to kind of parse out what's going on because we're seeing it from the bird's eye view. But I bet in the house, and I think this might be why a lot of the girls in the house are not actually saying anything. You know, that no one else is like speaking up really. I mean, they are in their in the moment interviews, but no one is saying anything really to Sydney and Maria because I think it's probably actually kind of confusing to understand what's happening.
What do you guys all think about the Sydney Maria drama that we're seeing in the house? Are you agreeing with some of our insights? Do you see what we're seeing in Sydney? Or do you feel like Maria, which side are you on? We want to know the team that you're playing with. Thank you again, Jenna, for coming on the podcast. It was so fun having you. This conversation was so much more multidimensional with your takes and your honesty. It was so refreshing to hear like what you thought about this very fun not fun, but this very interesting topic that we were unpacking together.
Oh yeah, thank you. I'm glad it glad I could add another dimension to it. I mean, it's essentially a very interesting and kind of silly drama, as we said, but we were clearly able to bring so much nuance to so many layers, and I love that for us, and I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I'm excited to see what everyone's thoughts and feelings are, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Oh my gosh. And everyone, of course, go listen, subscribe, follow to Date Card. It's amazing.
Come on over. I make also really weird unhinged memes, so y'all have
they're
a
really
good time.
Thank you all so much, and make sure you subscribe if you're not already. We will see you all next week for week 4, our little double episode. I don't even know what's gonna... I'm already stressed out, but excited. But we will see you all next week. Bye!